Hey, we'll see you May 11th in Denver, Colorado. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. We have a special guest I want to get to right away. Professor Richard Wolff is with us. He's the host of the YouTube economic update show, Democracy at Work. He's the author of many books, including the most recent book, The System is the Sickness, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. That book has a very handsome blurb in it from yours truly. Please welcome back to the show, Professor Richard Wolff.
Glad to be here, Jimmy.
So I wanted you to, so now you consider yourself a Marxist economist, and so I wanted to show you stuff. I keep seeing stuff like this, and I wanted you to explain what are people, so here's a tweet. It said, we're in big trouble if these Marxist psychopaths don't go to prison. There's Justin Trudeau, Bill Gates, and then Barack Obama. And then here's one more I'll show you. Make no mistake, these Hamas encampments are Marxist at their core. The same cast of characters as the BLM riots in 2020, except now they wear, how do you say that? Instead of N95 masks. Both have the same goal, though, to abolish Western liberties, values, and capitalism. Now, I always thought that Marxism was just about workers owning it was a critique of capitalism, and it was about workers owning the means of production. What do you think people think it means when you see them tweet out a picture of those three guys and say that Marxist is Hamas? What are they getting wrong?
What they're getting wrong, which I kind of understand, is the fruit of the last 75 years of American history. After World War II, and let's remember, during World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies in the war against Germany, Italy, and Japan. You know, it was difficult. In the immediate aftermath of that, everybody had to change uniform. The ally became the enemy, and the enemy became the ally. It was very confusing. And in the course of the last 75 years, the bad guys, the Soviet Union, socialists, Marxists, communists, all those kinds of words, became the sum total of horrible, evil, and bad. It's kind of embarrassing. In most other countries, Marxism is an understood point of view. There are magazines and parties and unions and all kinds of people with the label until the population learns what it means, but not here in the United States. I'll give you an example. I'm the product of elite education in this country. I went to Harvard, Stanford, and Yale. Those are the only schools I went to. Nobody taught us about Marxism at all. The occasional comments were dismissive. This is silly. So that nobody learned what it was, and so it became one of those words you could attach to anything that was bad. So you don't like something, you call it devilish, you call it evil, you call it awful, and then you add a few new words: Marxist, socialist, communist. Since most Americans didn't know mostly what that was all about, nobody had a big rule saying, well, that's a silly thing. And then you get the kind of picture you just showed. Justin Trudeau is a politician as far from Marxist as you can get. Bill Gates, I'd be surprised if he can spell Marxist. And Barack Obama, come on. No one should in a serious way do this. It's only in a peculiar part of the country where people really still get off on throwing that label around. It's embarrassing because it shows that you don't know what that tradition is all about, and you're just using it in a way that shows that you're kind of ignorant about it. I don't want to call folks names, but this is not serious. Marxism is a serious set of ideas. You don't have to agree with it. I find some of it interesting, others part I don't, but I'm not going to run away from having learned about it, because that just shows I'm ignorant or scared or both.
So how would you, in the briefest way possible, what would you define what a Marxist actually is? Because those three guys, so those two guys are just puppets of capitalists, and the other guy is a monopolist, capitalist, authoritarian. So what would you say? Is Marxism authoritarianism?
No, Jimmy, I would start off with your definition. It's fine. It's a critique of capitalism. Let's go back to Karl Marx. By the way, his birthday was May 5th, so we're pretty close. Let's go back to Marx and say what he said. He said, look, Adam Smith, David Ricardo, the great economists of the world, have been people who love capitalism, and that's fine. And they make a certain sense out of it, which is a sense of somebody who loves what they're thinking about and what they're trying to understand. And he said the only difference between them and me is I'm a critic. I think the human race can do better than capitalism, so I approach it from a critical perspective. And that's what Marxism has mostly been. That's certainly what I've learned from it. That's why I found it interesting. I needed to balance the cheerleading for capitalism, which is what passes in our universities as science. I needed to balance that with a critical approach. And that's what Karl Marx and the Marxists do. They give you a critical approach. And you know something? If you're a normally intelligent person, you kind of listen to the people who like it. Listen to them by all means. Then listen to the people who criticize it, and then make your own judgment. That'd be kind of a reasonable way to go. But if you're living in a country that's afraid of its own people, well, then you only give them a steady diet of the celebration, and you demonize the critics. I hope we're outgrowing that in this country, because certainly that's long overdue.
So people are in. So when I see people equate authoritarianism with Marxism, I think they get it confused. And because communism, it turned in again in its pure form is not that, but it played out that way in Russia, that it became authoritarianism. Certainly, it is in China. Yes. But Marxism isn't that. Marxism is Marxism is not anti-capitalism either, in a sense, right? But Marxism is for the buying and selling of things.
No, Marxism is anti-capitalism, but Marxism is not authoritarianism. You're right that people have taken it and used it in that direction. But come on, if you look at the history of Christianity, I'll pick an example, you can see lots of people who took one form or another of Christianity and used it in an authoritarian way in their church, in their community, in the country, in the whole world. And we've had lots of history that shows us all of that. And if you're going to say Marxists have also experienced the use of their ways of thinking and their ideas to support authoritarianism of one kind or another, yeah, absolutely. And that has been an argument and a fight inside of Marxism. You don't need to go to the enemies of Marxism to find a critique of authoritarian. Within Marxism, that argument has been made over and over again, and anyone with a passing knowledge of that tradition would know that there have been authoritarian tendencies and anti-authoritarian tendencies, just like those have existed in Christianity, Islam, or any other major global way of thinking.
So Marxism is you say it's anti-capitalism, but yeah, it's for the buying and selling of things. It's for manufacturing things and selling them, right?
Let me explain. It's mostly about how you organize production. It's not so much about how you organize distribution. Buying and selling is how we move things from where they were produced to where they're going to be consumed. That's what we have a market to do, right? A market, people come who have something to sell because it's been produced, and they exchange it for money with the buyer, etc. Marxism is not that interested in that. Marx was critical of starting your understanding of economics by looking at exchange or markets. He wanted to get people to look elsewhere. Where? To production. And here comes the punchline. The way capitalism organizes production is with a small group of people at the top whom we call employers, and a vast army of people underneath them that we call employees. And Marx said that's not the only or the necessary way to organize production. I think I have a better way. And that was his critique. We can do better than capitalism. And what was his idea? That you make the workplace a community, a democratic community. One person, one vote. Together we produce, dividing the labor up amongst ourselves, acknowledging that some people have more skills in this area or aptitude in that one. But we do it as a community, not as a group of people at the top who, by the way, are authoritarian inside the enterprise, and he was against that. He wanted a democratic arrangement of the kind we can find here in the United States throughout our history under the name worker co-op. It's just another way of thinking. That's what Marx's basic idea was. And it was an idea that said, look, in the old days of slavery, we had masters and slaves. And the human race got beyond that. And in the days of feudalism, after slavery, we had lords and serfs. And we got beyond that. Nowadays in capitalism, we have something that ought to scare us. Once again, a small group of people at the top. They're not masters, they're not lords, but they're employers. And they preside over a vast group of people who have many fewer rights and privileges and end up coming up on the short end of the stick. Those we call employees. We can do better than any. And just as we fought our way out of slavery and feudalism, it will come sooner or later that the employees will get up and say, we've had enough of this. We're going to run our own enterprises in a democratic, one person, one vote way. We don't need to have new masters, new lords called employers. We can do better than that. That's Marx's idea.
So
that's his basic push.
So I have been to worker co-ops. One that springs to mind. I was in Boise, Idaho. I went to a grocery store. It was a workers co-op. It looked like capitalism to me. It looked like all the stuff that is made by General Mills and all the stuff, Kellogg's and all kind of stuff was there. And then I took the money I have and I took it to a cash register and they sold it to me. So
absolutely, that part is the same. But here's the different part. When they sat down after the door was closed at 6 o'clock on a weekday, when they sat down, they had their meeting. Guess what? All the workers together democratically decided, among other things, who gets paid how much money. And guess what? They never gave 3 or 4 people an enormous amount of money so they could have a yacht and a mansion, and everybody else is wondering how to pay for their kids' college or how to put food on the table. They wouldn't do that because in a community of people, everybody with one vote, that's not what happens. That's where the difference comes. They run the business in a radically different way. But in the end, they want to give you your stalk of celery and get your money because they have to manage the business. But how they do it, what kind of community you have, how they relate to one another, that's what's different, and that's what's better than capitalism, at least from Marx's point of view.
And so I think a lot of people like me, this is a small business I started, right?
Right. And
so I needed an editor, I needed an assistant, so what if they got together and they decided they wanted to fire me? Now that it wouldn't. Is that what Marxism means? That they could get together and take over the company and get rid of me?
No, but it does mean that you would have to give them a roughly equal position in your business at some point. Doesn't have to be right away. Worker co-ops have developed a whole rich range of options. For example, if you start the business, that will give you, the worker co-op can decide, a certain importance, a certain power, a certain share of the output. All kinds of things have been arranged like that. You can have a trial period to see whether new people coming in understand and accept what it means to be part of a democratic community. Look, when we first got beyond kings and queens, and we democratized politics, and we said we're giving everybody the vote, the first thing you heard was, well, some people are smart and they pay attention to what's going on. They're going to have the vote. And then all the stupid people who don't give a crap, they're not going to have a vote. And this can never work. Guess what? It worked. There are a lot of arguments about this. I'm a professor of economics, spent all my life studying this stuff. I haven't the slightest doubt that working people are just as smart as those folks at the top. They can figure out, give a job to a person who loves that kind of work, who's good at it, who spent some time learning it. If you want more people doing that kind of thing and they have to have an education, offer them some more money. All of that can be done, and worker co-ops do all of that. But what they have is a basic commitment. We don't allow the division of a core, a small core, that board of directors, those 10 or 20 folks at the top, who most of us don't even know, to have all the power to hire, to fire. No. The firing you asked about. Firing becomes a very important decision that has to be made by everybody together. No one person has in their hands the power to fire 10 other people at their whim. And that's been a bone of contention in capitalism to this day.
So that the irony is that, as the way I see it, is that when people call Marxist authoritarian, it's the exact opposite. Capitalism is actually authoritarian. You have a boss who decides for everything and everybody, and what you get paid, and when you come to work, and when you go home, and where you work. For instance, the boss decides, I want to move my company to Mexico, and he gets to do that at the snap of a finger. So to me, that's the irony. People who say Marxists, they equate it with authoritarianism. It's exactly the opposite, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me speak personally. I'm a critic of authoritarianism. I've hated it all my life. I don't want other people telling me what to do unless I'm part of a community where we together can decide. I have my vote. I can live with. I don't want. I found my way to Marxism because I was anti-authoritarian. That's why, for me, Marxism was a very interesting set of ideas about how we can get the economy, the production of goods and services we all depend on, to be organized in a non-authoritarian way.
Right.
When I teach my students, I say what you say. You walk into a workplace, a factory, an office, a store, and you're walking into an authoritarian arrangement in which a very few people at the top can not only tell you where to stand and how to work and with what tool and for how long and when you can go to the toilet and all the rest, but can literally take the job away from you, depriving you, your family, your community of why are we allowing? Let me end with this. The U.S. Census counts people as employers or employees. You know what percent of our population in America is employers? 3%. The rest of us, this is not a system of equals and of democracy. This is an authoritarian system. Marxism is the critique of that, and it ought to interest people that are anti-authoritarianism because they'll find useful insights there.
Do you think a lot of people, because whenever I hear the argument, when I find most people don't know what any of the words mean in the first place, but a lot of it has to do with, like, let's say I have my own show, the Jimmy Dore Show. I would want to be the dictator of what happens in the end and not, I would take into account stuff.
Right.
But this is a small thing. I don't think people are like cognizant of the fact that all these companies are now bigger than countries. So now when a thing's that size, you don't have no constitution in it.
Right.
And there's no one to check them, because they check your goddamn government now.
Yes.
And
That's
so
right.
Why shouldn't the smartest people, what he just said is right. You know, a lot of smart people that could do, well, we don't want them. We want suck-ups for the pyramid. We want suck-ups.
Yeah.
I don't want you because you're smart.
Yeah.
And that's a criticism of communism you always hear. We got the same goddamn thing. It always becomes the same thing.
Yeah, capitalism and communism. Look at we make the point with the airline travel. There's only 2 companies in the whole goddamn world that make airplanes now, and one of them's completely corrupted. And
China's is better.
And so communism and capitalism seem to get to the same place. Hey, come see us do a live show. We're going to be in Denver, Colorado, May 11th, Los Angeles, California, doing a live panel show with a celebrity panel and video, Ashland, Virginia, Athens, Georgia, Rutherford, New Jersey, with Max Blumenthal, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Ontario, California, Irvine, California, Chicago, Illinois, with another celebrity panel, live video show in Chicago, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.